Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Roundtable Show. It's February the 9th. Yes, we're into February. Time is disappearing. We've got a really small but powerful panel. Hopefully a couple of the other panelists that are dragging themselves out of bed or whatever will be joining us as we mosey through our news topics. I'm going to let our panel introduce themselves. Ladies first. Sally, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is Sallie Goetsch. My business is WP Fangirl. I build Genesis websites for growing businesses and nonprofits, and I'm the organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California.
Yeah, and I think you need to move your mic a little bit in position. Yeah,
there we are. Chew on the mic.
There we go. And we got Chris from Lifter LMS. Would you like to introduce yourself, Chris?
Sure. My name's Chris Badgett. I'm the co-founder of Lifter LMS, which is a WordPress solution for creating, building, and protecting engaging online courses from your WordPress website.
That's great.
And awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. Yeah, awesome. Oh, let's go back to the other view. I'm playing around with Finn's viewers. I'm terrible. Shocking. Oh, I can't get back to one. Oh, there we go. And I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. We're a WordPress support maintenance company with an emphasis on learning management systems and management websites, management membership. That's what I meant. So I think we're going to go straight into the stories. We'll start off with WordPress 4.94 fixes critical auto updates. Doesn't seem the most exciting story, but I thought I'd throw it in because there seems to be there's been a couple of bugs recently that they've had to kind of quelch. Do you think they're just a little bit pushed with time, considering all the other things they're up to? What do you think, Sally?
It is possible, and I mean, it was kind of funny. You know, there's a new version of Gravity Forms that's in beta, and somebody in the Gravity Forms Slack was saying, you know, just release the darn thing already. And the guy from Gravity Forms was saying, oh yes, it's such a burden, you know, having to wait for your software to be properly tested before it comes out. You know, this was kind of an ironic
Is he English? Is he English?
I don't think so, but I don't actually know. I've never met them.
It's a very English sarcastic comment, didn't it?
Gravity Forms team, but you know, kind of like the WooCommerce issue we talked about last week. This was a little ironic because the thing that broke was the automatic update process, and so yeah, we had 4.93, and then suddenly 4.94, and everybody had to go update their websites themselves. And good morning, Adam. So, yeah, I mean, they may just be rushed. It's, I think everybody misses something. It's pretty hard to be dealing with something as large as WordPress and, not have a few bugs in there somewhere. I do think they're good about, fixing them quickly once they're discovered. But this was obviously a slightly embarrassing moment for the team.
It's just that recently it's been really going quite smoothly, and then they've had a couple, WooCommerce this. What do you reckon, Chris?
I think all software has bugs. I couldn't speculate, if it was because they're pressed if they're pressed for time because of something else. But sometimes what happens when you do roll out a new feature or fix something, then something somewhere else breaks. So it's all about the testing process, which is, it's almost like that rock that you're rolling up the hill, and testing can always get better. It's one, but yeah, I mean, things slip out sometimes. And sometimes you have to do the rollback, and sometimes you have to do a bunch of quick releases to improve it. But it doesn't surprise me. I am, though. The thing I will say is, WordPress in general does have a reputation for being buggy. And I think part of that is just the open source community of it all, where all these different products made by all these different people just push together. But so it doesn't help with that reputation, but I'm glad, there's news about the reality of what just happened.
Yeah, I think, and we just had another of the panelists join us, Adam from WP Crafter. Would you like to introduce yourself, Adam?
Yeah. Hey, guys. I always show up a little late. That's okay. Fashionably late, as they say. But for the listeners, my name is Adam at WPCrafter.com.
So we're talking about the latest update to to WordPress, Adam, and we had this WooCommerce update to fix a problem, and then we've had another update to fix another update problem. So it's not been going too smoothly lately, has it?
Yeah, but that's not so typical, though, I would say, with WordPress. No. I mean, they've been pretty consistent, and I think that's because they have maybe they're being a little bit more ambitious than they've been in the past, because they've been like, there's really an exciting update to WordPress. You know what I mean? It's like not exciting at all. Like they don't ever, like, they're not really packing in new features and doing stuff like that. So that's why I think there's been stability over the years. But I guess someone botched a couple updates.
Yeah, let's get on to the other story then. It was one from Sallie. It's time to ditch WordCamp tracks and what to do instead. Would you like to give a quick synopsis, Sallie, of the article?
Sure. So if people go to WordCamps very much, they are aware that usually there are multiple presentations going on at any given time, and there might be 2 or even 3 tracks, and they are sometimes divided into, like, designer, developer, business, or, beginner, expert, that sort of thing. And what the author of this post is arguing is that this is not really a very good idea, because first, he says, people are bad at self-identifying, that people don't necessarily know, or there are multiple things, maybe you're a beginning WordPress user and you're a business owner, or, you're a designer and a meetup organizer or some things. And so you actually have interests across tracks. And we know that Murphy's Law of conferences is that everything you want to see happens at exactly the same time. But the other point that I hadn't thought of so much is that it means that you don't mingle people as much, because you have sort of the developers hanging out with the other developers in the developer track, and and the beginners, and you don't get that much crossover. So you're not exposed to as many new people and new ideas. So, he then goes on to say, don't put all the similar sessions in the same room. Forcing people to switch rooms helps promote the hallway track with mingling and networking. Make people refer to this schedule. Help people to find sessions, like have people at the registration desk volunteer or put some, gather some suggestions, what he refers to as itineraries, and provide some examples. This is something that it seems like it's worth listening to. It's really tough organizing a conference. It's tough organizing a meetup and trying to choose topics and talks and organize them in some way, because if you're not going to have if you're not going to just have a one-track conference and then limit the number of potential sessions, you have to divide them up somehow.
Yeah, I think you must have read about. You must have. There must have been some psychic connection between us, because, funny enough, I interviewed Chris Coyer on Wednesday of CSS Tricks and Lister Parr. He's been ahead of a few conferences, and funny enough, we got onto this subject of conferences, and actually, it is a difficult one, isn't it, Sandy? But I really think that there are some strengths about it's become a tradition at WordCamps, these tracks that, in some ways they do work, but they definitely also do have some problems as well. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I was at WordCamp Sacramento. Actually, I met Sallie there in person. One of the cool, and you too, John. One of the cool things.
Are you trying to forget?
No, I'm not. One of the cool things Jennifer Bourne put on was a speed networking track or just talk. And so everybody, regardless of what kind of developer, business, beginner track they're in, we're in the room together. And a lot of people met a lot of people, talked about what they did. And I found that really cool. I think she called it facilitated networking. But that kind of made the crowd blend more than developers over here, hallway track people over here, business people over here, newbies over here. So I get the point, but I do think that the audience does need to self-select and, figure out which talks they want to go to if you're going to run multiple once. I like the menu of it all. So I'm of both minds. As long as there's something for everybody, but also an opportunity for everybody to get together, regardless of interest. I think as long as both happen, that's where the real win happens at a conference.
Yeah, I think you could mix it up, couldn't you? Because I'm a bit like you, Chris. I flutter from one track to the other like a butterfly, Chris. Adam's not. You don't think I'm a butterfly, do you?
Yes, we're all trying to imagine you with butterfly wings, Jonathan.
Adam was, oh God, he wasn't taking that one. But no, I'm a cheat. I move from one topic to the other, one track to the other, depending on my interests, because my interests are diverse. What do you reckon, Adam? Do you think it needs to be kind of mixed up a bit?
Well, I think anything, if you keep the same format or structure, it just becomes uninteresting over time. Now, I'll be the first to say I'm really conference inexperienced. So I know some of you guys have been probably more conferences than me. I've only been, as far as WordCamps go, I've only been to one WordCamp. And honestly, I can't remember one thing from one of those sessions. I can't even remember what the sessions were. I do remember some of the after. Actually, all I remember is what you do after the WordCamp and the networking part of it. So I guess it's always good to try new things, especially in business, you know what I mean? Try new things and try new formats. And I think there's definitely a breath of fresh air that comes in from that. However, I don't know. I guess, WordCamps are good and all. I don't know if I'm going to be going to many more. I mean, I might go to one or two this year or something like that, but it wouldn't be for a session per se. But I did kind of find, actually, and I'm going to stop talking right there because I got lots of opinions about things and sometimes I can dig a ditch for myself. But I am grateful that they do have WordCamps. I will say that. I am grateful that they do have that. If I was a WordPress user, I couldn't see myself going to a WordCamp, but I guess people do that.
Yeah, they do. I think for $40 and you meet some really interesting people. Interesting in air brackets, but you meet all types at WordCamps. I've met you meet. It is a very mixed bag, as they say. CEOs with all, from CEO to all types. That's what I love about them. But I just go because for $40 to show my support, and they're fun, aren't they? But I think.
I'll say one thing about WordCamps that I think could be improved upon. And isn't there some bylaw that you can't be like going to every WordCamp and being a speaker at every single WordCamp? They should be pulling from local talent. Because like if you looked at last year's WordCamp schedule, you got the same guys and girls going to every single WordCamp speaking. And like if you're a local person and you put your thing in, it's like, why are you flying people from all around the world? I put my speaking application in, and I'm right down the street. That is a little concerning to me. Isn't there some bylaw where it has to be local people?
I I don't know if it has to be. They encourage you to have local speakers and to make it a local community event with, maybe a few things. And what they just recently came out with is that they said, if you are a speaker, you can't give the same talk at multiple WordCamps because they get recorded and put on WordPress.tv, and they don't want like a dozen recordings of the same talk. So, and of course, that by itself is going to restrict the number of people flying around doing this, because you have to prepare 10 different talks to go to 10 different WordCamps, assuming you've actually got the travel budget for that or your company supports it. That's much more work than preparing one talk and giving it in 10 different places. And one of the reasons I didn't make it to WordCamp LAX this past year was that they were 2 weeks apart. And there was no way I was going to be able to prepare two different talks 2 weeks in a row. Why, good morning, John.
Good morning. Sorry about that. I got the time wrong, and then I was having a ton of technical difficulties, so there you go.
There we go. That's John Locke, one of our great panelists.
Yes, we're talking about WordCamp tracks, which I know you were interested in, John.
Oh, yeah, most definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think... to answer your question, Adam, I think it's a balance, but I think, especially the keynote speaker, I actually think it's a better idea if you've got somebody almost outside the WordPress community, somebody that people could recognize. But being, normally really top-notch keynote speakers, they're normally expensive, and because it's $40, they can't. The keynote speaker tends to be a bit difficult, but yeah, I definitely agree with you, but I think there's been a trend to try and mix it up a bit more, actually. But
I know there were several first-time speakers at WordCamp Sacramento this last time, because one of them was from my meetup.
One of them was one of my former co-hosts, Bill Conrad, did he? Wasn't he speaking?
He was.
He did.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was his first time.
Don't know. It's always the first time with Bill. But there we go. No, sorry. He's listening. He doesn't care what I say. Never did. I think we'll move on to the next story, and it's very good news that John joined us as is, because we're going to go into his story, 5 reasons for website redesign. John, would you like to give a quick synopsis about this article, John?
Yeah, most definitely. And like I said, like over the past 5 years, I've done about 80 different websites, and the top 5 reasons that I always see like people wanting to do a redesign at all, because nobody wakes up each morning saying, I want to spend a ton of money on building a brand new website, but there's usually, factors that drive it. And the 5 reasons are either they want more business, their website looks old and they're self-conscious of it because they're looking around and seeing competitors with newer sites, or people like their target customers or their internal team are not using their site, or they have features that they've been waiting to add and they just haven't had an opportunity, you know what I'm saying? Or nobody in the organization has updated the site because the CMS or the way that the site is set up is just too hard for them to use. Those are most of the reasons that I run into, like why people want to redesign the site. But it all really ties back to generating more revenue.
Yeah, it's normally I don't know if you agree with this, John. It's also normally a mixture of all those factors, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of jumbled mixture. But what do you reckon, Adam? Do you reckon? Because I reckon after about 3 or 4 years, a site, or even less, does start to look dated, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does. And, it's funny. if you're selling a website and, you're talking to your client, you're like, it's going to be $5,000 for your website. Oh, and by the way, you should get a new website every 2 years. I don't know how many people would be selling website design services, but that's really what you should be doing, because the technology gets better. What you use your website for is changing, and it becomes more and more and more, and that's always going to change. And this is actually a really good thing for website developers. But, I think if you're a business and you're going in, you're getting your website design, you might not have that expectation that, wow, this is going to look pretty like dated in 2 years, you know what I mean? Because things are changing that fast.
Well,
and you never want to.
The trendier it is when you build it, the faster it will look dated.
That's true. You can hold on to some core design principles. But for me, I would always want to look at my competitors, and I would want to have a better looking, better optimized website than my competitor, you know what I mean? Because I want someone, you really, when you go to someone's website, you are judging them and their business. I can't tell you how many times, I'm in the WordPress space, right? I create content, and I'll look at some other content creators' website, and I'm like, man, your website's a disaster. I can't believe anyone would look at your website and think you're credible in any way. It's kind of like the mechanic that always drives the broken down car. You know what I mean? It's the same concept. But, as far as I think your website is the best investment you could make. And, I think a good business strategy too. I don't know. And
we're not biased about that idea at all.
It's actually just so unmistakable, because that's where discovery happens. People aren't calling the yellow pages. They're going to your website and they're judging you immediately. They're immediately making judgment calls. And it's like, how often do you get a haircut? For me, I cut my hair every day, but you gotta maintain things, keep things looking good always. And your website falls into that category of keeping looking good, keeping on top of it, I think, so I'm totally with this. I don't know, John, do you set the expectation, since you're the writer of this awesome post here? Do you set an expectation with your client that, every year or two we want to reevaluate your website?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that it might have been in a more in a different article, but really I think the cycle is, at the most 4 years, but it probably should be closer to what you're saying is 2. Between that 2 and 4 year gap is when most businesses do it. One thing that I've kind of tweaked in my own business over the last year or so is targeting more of businesses that have the actual means to redo their site every 2 to 4 years, to where it's not such a big deal. And, the expectation is kind of understood from the start that it's going to be a continuous improvement. I think when you have businesses that just generate more revenue, they're going to put more into it because they value it more. I think it's more when you get down to the solopreneur level, and maybe people who are, just starting a business, and nothing against that, but those are the people that kind of tend to invest less.
True. I was going to ask Chris, because of your own, because of your own website, and you've got a product that's quite complicated, and your website is the main, one of the main methodologies that you try and explain the features, the value to your client base. So how much discussion on a monthly or, on an ongoing basis does the website take up in your own organization, Chris?
I would say it gets daily attention. I think one of the things is that what people, in many cases, especially if you have a global digital product business, you don't need a website, you need a technology partner if you're not the website builder yourself. So this whole thing about the website's not necessarily the finish line. You may want to redo it in 2 years, but it's best if you have somebody with you on the journey, on your team or outsourced professional that you can use as needed. So it's just critical for business. And I think outside of the WordPress bubble or the web design community, I come across a lot of very outdated, terrible websites. I was getting a massage the other day. I could not find her on the internet. I could not find her on Facebook. I went to her office. It was closed. I had to go to the office next door where they had her business card. And finally, I was able to get her phone number. And this is the reality of a lot of small business out there these days. So when you're in the industry, you see a lot of websites and a lot of nice looking stuff, but there's a lot of stuff out there that's behind the times. And just the other thing I would add is that, the website is John's first point in his great article about incoming business and increasing that. The website can drive business for sure. It can capture leads. It can, attract leads through SEO, like John's SEO services for manufacturing. But also, the website itself can become a new unit of business if it is, more than just a content site, but also an application delivering other stuff, digital products, courses, memberships, software, whatever. So the website itself can also be an additional line of business. So it's critical. It's critical.
Yeah, I think, go on. What you going to say?
I was going to say, we got these cell phones, and everybody, that catchphrase the last 2 years was selfie, right? Selfie. How often do people update their selfies? Like every 2 days, right? Well, your website is your business's selfie. I mean, you got to keep that thing looking good. That's all. Okay.
Yeah. Well, lots of people buy a new car every other year. Which astonishes me because, I kind of drive mine until they collapse around me. But, and that's a huge investment, and people don't think very much about it. That's just, they commute a lot. They want a new car. And yeah, I think there is a lot about, attitude that goes into this. And there is also, if you're just starting a business, you don't have a lot to invest. But that is a good time to start doing this, and I emailed on my clients this year and talked about, kind of performing an annual review of your website, checking to see, like, first, is everything still working? Does it still represent who you and your business are? If this website were one of your employees, would you be giving it a raise or firing it? Is there more that you want to start to do? Check the SEO, check the accessibility, check, just check some basic things and say, is this still working? Is this serving you as well as it could, or is there something that we should do that would that would improve it? And that may not be a complete redesign. It may be an addition of something, but I updated the designs on several client sites last year, and I'm talking to one now and saying, wow, yeah, it was 2013 when we built your website. And design-wise, it hasn't held up too badly, but it's still definitely time to kind of take a look at this and say, all right, what do we want to do differently? Because the technology does change, and it becomes possible to do things that that you couldn't do 1 year ago, never mind 5.
Yeah, before we go for a break, I think the other consequence is the origins of web design, because its origins, some of the metaphor and origins came from print, brochure site, the concept that you get it done, there's a period of time, and then in a lot of clients' minds, it's done, which is the totally incorrect, understandable, but totally incorrect mental attitude to it. Because fundamentally, it's never done, because it's not print, it's digital, and it's an ongoing process. There is no end. There's points, there's outcomes that you want to obtain, but it's not a printed brochure. So a lot of these attitudes come from historical other platforms that migrated into the language. Hopefully I'm not waffling.
If I could just tell a very short story that cements that point. I lived in a town that had 2 pizza restaurants at once. One of them literally had a brochure site, which was a PDF of their menu. And then another one, which had worse food, had a decent modern website. You could actually place your pizza order through the phone or on the website. And I watched the website that accommodated the customer win, and the other one went out of business. It was just that simple.
And people started having different here's another point to add to that. Sorry to cut you off. Website visitors' expectations evolve. So if you would have said 2 years ago, ordering food online, I'll never do that. I'm just going to pick up the phone. I like to talk to them because I want that spicy sauce and I want this done that way. But today, I want to go to a website and it's the same thing. There's Project Pie and there's Woodstone Pizza. Woodstone Pizza takes my order online and I can pay on PayPal. I order at Woodstone Pizza. If I'm getting gasoline, I'm just ordering it on my phone. I don't want to call you. I have this new expectation that your website should be doing this, and I rather use the company that is more convenient.
Yeah, well, there we are. But before we go for a break, I want to talk about our sponsor, Intelligence WP, which basically, what did it do? It really puts your Google Analytic data on steroids, and it displays it inside WordPress. And it provides a load of additional functionality, which you probably won't get from other Google Analytical plugins that you can use. It's free. They have packages where they supply installation and ongoing training. Go to Intelligent WP and find more about it. I think it's great, and they really kind that they support the show. It's really nice of them. We're going to go for a break, folks. We're going to come back and we've got some more stories about WordPress or things interesting in general. Be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. We've had a good discussion. Adam got very passionate before we went for our break, but there we go. I'm very un-English. But there we are. On to another story that Sallie was kind enough to provide. And it's from Delicious Brains. 2017, a year in review, hiring, firing, and revenue details. The good, the bad, and the ugly. It sounds like a spaghetti western, doesn't it, Sallie? Would you like to give us a quick synopsis about this article, Sallie?
Well, this is kind of like the sequel to the year in review we had from Pippin Williamson a few weeks ago. It's a very detailed discussion of what went on with the company and the difficulties of having to let people go, and also sort of what they did, who was in charge of what, how it worked.
Is this ongoing trend, Sallie, of CEOs giving it all intervention to the outside world? Well,
I think it's always interesting to see how people run their businesses in that much detail, and what worked and what didn't. And I presume that's a large part of why they published this. But, lots and lots of people write year in review posts. I've done it once or twice. And when I haven't done it, I've thought about doing it and then not found the time. And then it's, March and nobody cares. So yes, I think it is a trend, but it's interesting to see it broken down, and I think it's useful for people to write these things and actually take a look at what has happened, because while you're in the middle of doing it, you may or may not be tracking it very well. And I think if you are a real CEO as opposed to a freelancer type like me, you probably do have a better sense of we have a strategic plan and here's where we are on it, versus and we've gotten to the end of the year. What did I accomplish? But he's saying so they had a growth strategy and they realized, we're not actually doing so well here. We have to change what we're doing and what we're approaching, and what they found was that they did end up with growth, but not the same growth pattern that they'd been expecting. And now they feel like they're more on track. And so, and then they have a list of, goals for 2018, which, we can come back at the end of the year and see, did they meet those goals? And I'm pretty sure we'll be getting a post about how successful they were or weren't at this. And, I always admire people who make up these lists of goals and then achieve them, because my experience is more like, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Exactly. Obviously, when you read that article, everybody gets a different kind of. There's a bit of it that kind of hits home with them. And Chris, one thing that struck me was when he was saying he was hiring people, and I think it wasn't office manager, it was a marketing stroke outreach manager, and he said he had 300 application, and he spent hours and hours and hours and hours, and you got to. I think there's a balance here, Chris. I found that if the right candidate came to me, I knew straight away they're the right person, and when it was the wrong person, I hired them because I was under pressure. I needed somebody. And deep down, I knew they weren't really the right candidate. I just intellectually persuaded myself that it would work out. But my core sense told me that and it normally panned out. What do you think about that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, hiring is it's the backbone, especially of a remote company where the team is distributed. You have to have the right people. And over time, I think you do get a good gut instinct about people. There's a phrase I like to use called batteries included, especially in the online world with remote teams. You need people that are fired up and ready to go, and they're going to have unique skill sets. But in my experience, my gut is usually correct. And I've worked hard to deleverage risk by doing proper hiring, having the team help in the interview process, because they're going to be working together. It's not just my opinion that matters. And also, doing sample projects, and then also just having really good communication and take the time to develop a relationship. So if things are going not well, or so there's miscommunication going on, don't hide from it and let it get worse, but confront it head on. But yeah, I think it's something, the more you do, it's you do start to get a little bit of a gut intuition about it. But I'm also a fan of, sometimes when you meet the right person, like I know I don't even have the exact role for this person open at my company, but I need to get them inside. And you can always train the skills, but hire the person. And I think that's happening more and more in the online world, when you find these superstars who are capable of both operating in a complex world, but also still able to get really focused and do deep work. It's becoming harder and harder to find those people. So when you come across it, it's really a beautiful thing.
Oh, right. Yeah, because funny enough, me and John, like I say, Chris Coyer, we interviewed him together on Wednesday. John agreed to be my co-host because Kim wasn't available. And, one of the questions you put, John, was about why there isn't kind of more apprenticeship, more training. And Chris said that he had to kind of break that rule himself because he just needed somebody to cover maternity of one of his main developers. But do you think, I just feel that sometimes people over interview, it's too analytical. What do you think, John, or am I just waffling?
No, I've actually, the people that I know that run agencies, like personally, I know that happens a lot, where say one of their employees will have a family emergency, or they'll have to take a maternity leave, and you don't really have time to go through a full-fledged hiring process. You just gotta grab somebody, and even if it's just for the short term. So I think that does happen a lot. But I think Probably, and Chris could probably tell me if I'm wrong here, but you always should be like keeping your eyes open for talented people that are in your network or that your network might know.
I call that building the virtual bench.
Yep,
something
exactly. Carl Smith from Engine, they used to call that for engineers, I believe was the term that they had for it, like people that they could, exactly as you said, like a bench of people that they could rotate into projects that they had worked with and liked, and they did good work. But they knew what it was like to work with them. Yeah, so definitely, yeah.
I just want to ask Adam what's his experience before we go with a story that Adam's provided. Adam, what's been your experience hiring people? Do you think you can overdo it with too many interviews, or what's been your basis of your experience?
I have online and offline experience in this department, and I'll tell you, I suck at both. I am like the worst at all of it. Right now, I do have a couple. I'm starting to build my team of people. I have a graphic designer, so if you've seen any of my content recently, the thumbnail images are beautiful. But like I'm like getting frustrated with the guy at times. You know what I mean? I want him to like work harder. You know, I just have a difficult time. I just hired 2 content writers, and they're kind of getting kind of slow with it. So, you know, it's hard to level up a business and learn this. And there's also different stages of it, right? So there's that initial stage where there's just a couple people, but then to scale it up, it's a whole different way of going about it. You know, I think for me though, I'm like the worst boss because I don't want to be anyone's boss because I have these like very demanding expectations, and I don't like to put myself in that situation. But you know, it is not easy to grow a business. It's unmistakable. It's not easy.
All right. So we're going to go on to the story you just provided, Adam. And it's Google sets deadline for HTTPS and warns publishers to upgrade soon. Can you give us a quick synopsis of this, Adam?
Yeah, well, this is actually breaking news. You know, it's very, very breaking, like yesterday breaking. And, you know, it's funny. If you don't have your website in Google Webmaster Tools, you are playing with fire. I liken it to not having a current address with the IRS, and they send you a letter and you don't get that letter and you're screwed, and like three months later, you're like having a major uphill battle. That's like not being in Webmaster Tools, and that's like not paying attention to what the almighty Google says. So as of yesterday's announcement, this breaking news, the almighty Google says, you have to have an SSL certificate by this summer, and if you don't, and so they've increased the requirement. So first it was just a login form. Then last October it was any form. So if you're using Google Chrome, it'll say insecure website. Now, if you don't have an SSL certificate by this summer and anyone visits your website using Google Chrome, it's going to say insecure website. And I don't know about you, but I don't want someone using Google Chrome visiting my website and having that word insecure anywhere, you know? So this is like, now you have to do it. You literally have to do it. You have no choice. You can't say I don't have e-commerce, I don't have comments or logins or anything. You have to do it now.
Yeah, we're going through that actual process with a few clients right now, actually. It's quite, like you say, a bit like Sallie's story. Kind of read my mind because we've been dealing that. Yeah.
And just get it done with. Just get it done with.
Well, it's so easy these days because, you know, very many hosts are providing free SSL through Let's Encrypt, and you know, you push a button on the dashboard or you fill out a request form, and then bang, it's taken care of. And you know, pretty much, if your hosting company isn't providing that, you should change hosting companies.
Well, me and John can tell you about that one.
But the truth is, though, there's actually on the WordPress, so it's easy to get an SSL certificate, but on the WordPress side, you could do it wrong and totally screw yourself up. So I'm gonna pass the mic to John to talk about redirects and SEO, because that is you gotta make sure you're doing it right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, Adam. And like you said, you want to make sure you want to get with your hosts. Like if you're switching from HTTP to HTTPS, and like you said, a lot of people worry about that. And I think that's why a lot of people have hesitated from moving from HTTP to HTTPS. Either they just don't know and don't care, or they're afraid that their SEO is going to tank. And one thing that you have to make sure is with your host, make sure that they're doing a site-wide redirect of that HTTP to HTTPS if there's not a site-wide redirect for that protocol, because Google looks at a HTTP and a HTTPS version of the same domain name as two separate sites. And and like I said, if you have that set up in Google Webmaster Tools or Search Console, you already know that they make you register like two different ones because they look at it as two different like properties. So yeah, that's definitely something to do. But as you mentioned, a lot of these hosting companies, especially the WordPress hosting companies, they offer it free through Let's Encrypt. I want to pass on an anecdotal story really quick. I talked to a guy like not that long ago, and he said he had a friend that was an engineer at Google. I don't know how much truth there is to this, so take this with a grain of salt. But what he passed to me was that with the mobile friendly and HTTPS, Google has given websites and webmasters like so much like forewarning on those two issues that they feel that if you're not mobile friendly and you're not HTTPS, that basically they're just like, you don't care about your site, so why should we? So take that as you will, So.
Yeah, well, I mean, responsive design has been around since 2011, 2010. You really, if you don't have a mobile-friendly site by now, you really are not keeping up. But yeah, it is really important to make sure that, say, you change your Google Analytics over to tracking the HTTPS version of your site, or you're going to wonder where the heck all your traffic went, and that, that you put it into Webmaster Tools, and that there is, however you're setting it up, whether you're doing it through, Cloudflare or your htaccess file or your hosting company is doing it, to make sure all requests get redirected to HTTPS, and then that's what you're tracking, and then you won't be wondering, where is my site traffic?
Yeah, well, but there's also when you've got a really large site, and there's
scary.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a bit of a discussion about all this, but there we are. It's been quite surprising that they haven't pushed it a bit. Well, they hinted and then they backed off a bit, didn't they? I think time flies. I think this was over a year, almost 18 months ago. They seemed like they were going to get a bit heavy on it, and then they kind of backed off a bit, didn't they? Am I right about it? And then they now seem to be, obviously the article that Adam's just put to us, and that they're going to get a bit more like heavy again, aren't they?
I know you can't get more heavier than this.
Yeah.
I mean, I see warnings on sites. It definitely started happening last year, and our January 2017 meetup was about these things coming down the pike. One of which was HTTPS, and one of which was the interstitials on mobile. And it's not just Google that shows warnings. Firefox shows warnings too. They look a little different. So this is an issue. We have had quite a bit of notice about it, and I can't see why Google would feel sorry for anybody who wasn't paying attention and hadn't got the memo by now.
But it's all about, like what Chris said about these two pizza. Can you imagine the kind of average, I'm not being dismissive here, because running any kind of successful business is really time consuming, and you can't be knowledgeable in all areas. But can you imagine, Chris, some person, some pizza, and they got their website and they're having to kind of understand the difference through HTTP and HTTPS and all that. Well,
it's technobabble for some.
It's babble, isn't it?
Yeah,
I've been guilty of.
Let's see you make a nice pizza dough, Jonathan.
Oh yeah, I might surprise you. I've got some skills actually. No, I can't.
Different skill sets for different folks. That's what makes this a challenging issue. Is unless you're close to your website or actively maintaining it with somebody, this might take some people by surprise.
We certainly do. I think we're going to wrap up the show now. I think we've covered a load of stuff. This has been good stuff. We've covered a load of territory. I'm going to let Sally. Sally, how can people get hold of you and learn some more about what you're up to?
You can find me at WPFangirl.com, and you can find my meetup at eastbaywp.com. And I am at Sallie Goetsch on Twitter. And if you can spell my name, you will find me. I am unique in Google.
You are unique. There we are. Chris, how can people find more about you?
You can find more about me at lifterlms.com. I also have a podcast for course creators and membership site builders called LMS Cast.
And you've been on a bit of a high wave with your interviews. You've been knocking out some great stuff, Chris.
One a week.
Yeah, great. Adam, how can people find more about you and what you're up to?
WPCrafter.com, or you can just go to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/WPCrafter. Love to have you on the website.
Yeah, and if you're interested in WordPress, you definitely want to go to Adam's website, and there's a load of good stuff there. And John Locke, how can people find out more about you, what you're up to?
You can find me at my website, which is lockdowndesign.com, and I'm either Lockdown Design or Lockdown_ everywhere. How did the people get a hold of you, Jonathan?
Oh, thanks, John. It's really quite simple. Go to the WP-Tonic website. There's a load of content. I've just published an article about hacking and how to avoid it. And we've got a load of new content that will be coming up on the website this month. We're going to really be hammering away on the content, and we'll be surprising people. And if you really want to support the show, go to iTunes and give us a review, good, bad, or indifferent. I don't care. It's always fun to read the reviews, and it really does help the show. And we'll be back next week, where we'll be having a panel of WordPress junkies, experts, passionate people about WordPress. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
Bye.
Whoops.